Hi, I'm Linda. Welcome. This is our read through of an instructional novel and cookbook from 1917. This book is called A Thousand Ways to Please a Husband, and it is the story of a young couple and the bride, Bettina. She is sharing her recipes with us, and so let's get started with the month of July. Chapter 7, A New-Fashioned Sunday Dinner. "You will go to church with us this morning, Bettina?" asked Bob's cousin Henry, known also as the Reverend Henry Clinkersmith, as he came into Bettina's immaculate kitchen one Sunday. "Yes, indeed, I will go," Bettina answered him. "Is it nearly 10 o'clock?" "Oh, yes, 9:45. I'll go at once and get ready." Cousin Henry had arrived late Saturday evening. He was filling the pulpit of a friend that Sunday morning. Bettina finished arranging the low bowl of pansies, which was to be her table decoration. "For the dinner table," she explained to Cousin Henry. "And Bob," she said as they walked to church. Cousin Henry was ahead with an old friend. "I do believe he was worried about dinner. There wasn't a trace of any preparation to be seen. You know I made the cake and the salad dressing yesterday, and the lettuce is on the ice. The sherbet was on the porch. I bought it, you know. And the lamb and potatoes were in the cooker." "Well, let him worry. How long will it take to get it ready after we get home?" "About 15 minutes. The table is set, but I'll have to warm the plates and take things up. Then there's the gravy to make, of course." "All I can say is this," said Cousin Henry at dinner, as he passed his plate for a second helping. "Since you've explained the mysteries of the fireless cooker, I realize how it would have helped those cold Sunday dinners of the past generation. The women could have obeyed the fourth commandment and given their families a good Sunday dinner too." That day they had leg of lamb with potatoes, head lettuce, Thousand Island dressing, lamb gravy, mint sauce, bread, butter, pineapple sherbet, Bettina's loaf cake, coffee. And remember, it's summer and it's hot out there, at least where I live, so make sure you're hydrating. What do I have today? I have ice water with some lemon in it. All right, we'll see you for the discussion. So let's take a dive into the chapter and discuss what we noticed. All right. So I noticed that Bettina and Bob walked to church on a Sunday morning, and they had their house guest from the night before, and he's going to fill the pulpit or be a guest pastor teaching at the church that Sunday. And he was going to eat lunch with them after church, and Bettina was concerned that he thought that she wasn't going to have anything ready or it was going to take forever to prepare, but she had planned ahead for that, hadn't she? So she had particularly, set the table with a lovely centerpiece, of course, with flowers, as she often does. And this time she was using pansies, and in a low bowl. And so that was lovely. She got that ready ahead, and she had prepared some of the foods. And she particularly talked about an interesting thing called the fireless cooker. And she was so pleased with that device, or that cooking appliance, which I believe today is like our crock pot or our instant pot. And I'll tell you a little bit about it because I did look it up to find out about it. So the fireless cooker was also called a hay box sometimes, and it was an insulated container. And according to Bettina, she would heat a disc to put over the food and a disc to put under the food, and then close it up into this box and leave it closed for 3 hours. So what it is it's some type of an insulated container. Usually it was insulated with hay or with wool batting, and what you would do is you'd pre-cook your food like meats, you would need to get them up to 145 or 165 in their internal temperature first. But if they were more tough cuts of meat, it was good for that, because you would then put it in the fireless cooker and leave it there for 3 hours, and it would slowly continue to cook and get tender. So it was particularly good for tough meats, and it was also good for things like casseroles, but you did need to add some hot broth or hot water to keep that temperature up at the beginning and to keep the moisture in. So let's see, what else did I find out about that? Well, what did she cook in hers for this meal? She had a leg of lamb and potatoes in her fireless cooker, or her hay box. So then you notice the name of the relative is the Reverend Henry Clinker-Smith, and he commented mentioning the fourth commandment. So in case you're not familiar with that, I will tell you that it comes from the book of Exodus. And one place that you find it is in chapter 20, verse 8. And so in the second book of the Bible, Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says, well, verse 1, and God spoke all these words, saying, and then verse 8, he said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Okay, so that's the reference that the Reverend was pointing to for keeping the Sabbath, and he was mentioning that because she had used that fireless cooker, it was a nice device to keep the Sabbath day holy and not to work too much on the Sabbath, right? And we know that Matthew 12:8 tells us that, well, Jesus in Matthew 12:8 tells us that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And that in Matthew 12:12 he says it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So just some things to keep in mind. And traditionally it has been a practice of many to use their crock pot for a Sunday lunch or Sunday dinner. And so you might want to think about that, about preparing ahead, or that way when you're at church on Sunday, if you want to invite a guest or another family over to eat, you already have something ready to go. I once heard a woman who recommended throwing in a cut up chicken and some rice, a few veggies, and she knew that then she'd have the soup ready when anybody came over after church. So that's something you might consider doing. And then I don't really have too much more to say about this chapter. So tomorrow we'll look forward to chapter 8, and that will bring us in to continue with our July chapters. So chapter 8 is called Celebrating the Fourth. And what you'll find is that even in 1917, the 4th of July was celebrated, and they're going to have a picnic, so we'll learn about that. Thanks for joining me. Now, I did want to share with you one of the recipes from this chapter because I thought it was rather interesting, and I did try it out. I sampled it. So this is called a loaf cake, Bettina's Nut Special. And I made this, and the family gave it a try, as well as a guest of mine who came to eat with us on the 4th of July. And this little cake was made in a loaf pan, just like a little loaf of bread. And it had a very fine crumb and an interesting flavor. Somewhat lemony, as you'll see why. But it was, to me, a different combination of spices. So here's what the recipe calls for. As far as the ingredients go, 1/3 cup of butter, 1 cup of sugar, 1 egg, 1½ cups of flour, 1/2 a teaspoon of cinnamon, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, which is the same as 1 tablespoon, 1/4 a cup of nut meats cut fine, and we grow walnuts here, so I used walnuts chopped up really fine in my chopper. 1/4 a teaspoon of salt, 2/3 a cup of milk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/2 a teaspoon of lemon extract. And then what you do to make this loaf cake is you cream the butter, add the sugar and the egg. You mix it well. Then you add in the flour, baking powder, cinnamon, nut meat, salt, milk, vanilla, and lemon extract. You beat for 2 minutes. Then you pour it into a loaf cake pan prepared with waxed paper. You bake it for 30 minutes in a moderate oven, according to the recipe. However, when I made it, I think I added 10 minutes over and over. I think it must have baked for at least 50 minutes. And I have one of those clay type loaf pans from the Pampered Chef that I got years and years ago. It's a nice pan that doesn't really stick. Things don't really stick to it, but I did line it with wax paper, just from the long side down and then back up the long side. And it did come out nicely. It lifted out really well using that method. So again, 1/3 cup of butter, 1 cup of sugar, and 1 egg. And then you add everything else. And I used an electric beater for 2 minutes. So it came out with a really thick batter. And like I said, the loaf cake had a really fine crumb. I thought it was tasty. Again, the nuts were finely chopped. So they weren't very obtrusive, but it just added some texture. And the flavor of the lemon extract, though only 1/2 a teaspoon, it really came through. What I thought was interesting is just the addition of cinnamon and vanilla along with the lemon extract. So anyway, you might want to try that yourself, and I will post a picture of that at the end here.